This presentation will discuss vaccines across the lifespan, specifically teenage vaccines. During this presentation, we will discuss the vaccine development and approval process in the United States, describe the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices and its role in recommending vaccines, and we will identify the vaccines recommended for preteens and teenagers and describe why they are important. Let's start by discussing vaccine development in the United States. Vaccine development begins with extensive testing in the lab. This process can take many years as researchers look for different methods to create the vaccine which will produce good yields of vaccine for lower cost. The type of vaccine is also looked at in the lab. There are several different types of vaccines in the United States at this moment. Inactivated vaccines, which we use for hepatitis A, flu, polio, and rabies vaccinations, are killed versions of the virus. These vaccines may need boosters in the future. There are also live attenuated vaccines. This uses a weakened version of the virus and can be seen in measles, mumps, rubella, and rotavirus vaccines, as well as smallpox, chickenpox, and yellow fever. This type of vaccine provides a longer-lasting immune response. Messenger RNA, as we saw in the COVID-19 vaccinations, use proteins to trigger immune response, and subunit, recombinant, polysaccharide, and conjugate vaccines use a piece of the virus to trigger the immune response. We see this in Haemophilus influenza type B, hepatitis B, HPV, pertussis, pneumococcal vaccines, meningococcal vaccines, and shingles vaccines. This type provides a strong immune response. Toxoid vaccines use a toxin made by the bacteria itself. We can use this type of vaccine for diphtheria and tetanus vaccines. This type of vaccine might need a booster in the future. And we also have viral vector vaccines, which use a modified version of a different virus to implant the vaccine into the body. We saw this in COVID-19, and we are also studying it in the flu and Ebola vaccines. Once phase 0 is finished, once the laboratory research is finished, vaccine development moves on to phase 1 trials. Phase 1 trials take 20 to 100 healthy volunteers, and they're looking at how the body reacts to the vaccine. What does the body do to the vaccine? What does the vaccine do to the body? How does the body eliminate the vaccine? How long does the vaccine stay within the body? Does it work? Does it promote an immune response? They look at the size of the dose. What size of a dose provides an appropriate immune response so we don't have to go too big or too small? Are there any serious side effects that we see in this small group of people? All of these things are looked at in phase 1 trials. Once phase 1 trials are finished, we typically move to phase 2 trials, where we have several hundred volunteers. They are healthy volunteers, they are adults. And they look at the most common short-term side effects, things like an injection site redness or a low-grade fever after having received the vaccines. They're looking at how are the volunteers' immune systems responding to the vaccine? Is the vaccine staying in their bodies long enough to provide an immune response? How long does that response last? Then we move on to phase 3 trials, where we have hundreds or thousands of volunteers. Again, these are all healthy volunteers, these are all adults, but they're looking at, is the vaccine safe? Is it effective? Does it affect everybody the same way, regardless of age or race or gender? What are the most common side effects? Are there any less common side effects? They're looking at things like, if you were given the vaccine and you were not given the vaccine, how does that compare to who actually gets sick? And what manufacturers do is that they have these 3 sets of clinical trials, and they have all of the data gathered in these trials, and they go to the FDA. The FDA will look at the manufacturing process. They'll look at the quality of the vaccine. They'll look at the how the process worked. Is it applicable for a scale-up option? And the FDA will only license the vaccine if it is safe and effective, and its benefits outweigh the risks. So is it safe and effective, meaning if I give you the vaccine, A, are you going to be okay? And B, is it effective? Is it going to do what we want it to do? And also, does the benefit of giving you this vaccine outweigh the risk? Does keeping you safe from this disease outweigh the risk of giving you the vaccine? The next step in the process of vaccine development is, after the FDA approves a vaccine, it will go to the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. ACIP is a committee of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, and they are tasked with making vaccine recommendations. So members of ACIP are selected by the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They are all volunteers. There are 15 voting members. 14 of those members are experts in some form of vaccinology or immunology or pediatrics or internal medicine or viruses or public health, nursing, infectious disease, etc., etc. One voting member is a consumer representative to make sure that the committee has the best interests of the public at heart. There are also 8 members that represent other federal agencies, and there are 30 non-voting representatives of liaison organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics and so on. So ACIP's role in all of this is to look at the safety of the vaccine at specific ages. It looks at how well does a vaccine work at specific ages. Does the vaccine work better when a person is younger or better when a person is older? Is it safer when you're younger? Is it safer when you're older? How serious is the disease that this vaccine prevents? There are several vaccines that we only give to children because if an adult were to have this disease, it would be like the common cold. So there's no need for an adult to have the vaccine. However, if a child gets the disease, they could get really sick. So it's better for the child to have the vaccine. They also look at something called how many children would get the disease the vaccine prevents if we didn't have it. Measles is a great example of this. Measles, if you're in a room with 100 people and one person has measles, if nobody is vaccinated, 90 people will get measles. So that would lead to an extreme drain, not only on the healthcare system, but a whole lot of people sick. So ACIP will review all the available data about the vaccine. They'll look at all the clinical trial data, they'll look at other studies, and they will develop recommendations for the use of this vaccine. They'll recommend the age that the vaccine should be given. They'll recommend the dose. They'll recommend any booster shots, that type of thing. They also continue to monitor vaccine safety and effectiveness data as the vaccine is given to the public. ACIP recommendations are not official until the CDC director reviews and approves them, at which point they will be published and they will become part of the United States official schedule. Once a vaccine has been looked at by ACIP and they've made their recommendations, the recommendations have gone to the director of the CDC for review and approval, and everything has been approved, the dose has been approved, who can get it has been approved. That approval will be published in the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, the MMWR. This is the final and official CDC recommendation for immunization for that particular disease. The other thing to know is that anytime a vaccine is going to be given in conjunction with another vaccine, that too needs to be tested, and that too needs to show trial data, and that too needs to go before the FDA and the CDC to show that safety. So the entire schedule of vaccinations in the United States, the childhood schedule, the adult schedule, has been tested individually. Each of the vaccines have been tested for safety and efficacy, but the entire schedule, the timing, which vaccines are put together, all of that has also been tested to ensure safety and efficacy of the vaccines being given. These schedules do come with input from different agencies, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Physicians, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the American College of Physicians, et cetera, to make sure that the safety of their population of children, of adults, of pregnant people are all taken into account when creating these schedules and making sure that they are as safe as possible for everybody, as many people as possible. Once the CDC and the Department of Health and Human Services have made their recommendations and published the schedule in the MMWR, vaccine safety continues to be monitored by both the CDC and the FDA. So what we're looking for in this step is we're looking for any kind of possible side effects that weren't seen in the phase 1, 2, or 3 trials. We're looking at further risks. We're looking at whether or not it's being used. We're looking at, we're getting this data that says, this is how many people had this vaccine, this is how many people got sick from the disease, how are we doing, that type of thing. There are a couple different ways that we monitor it. The first one is the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS. This collects and analyzes any kind of adverse event that happens after vaccination. Anybody can submit a report. Parents, patients, healthcare professionals, if somebody got a vaccine and then something happened, even up to and including a car crash, you can submit that to VAERS and somebody will look at that report and see if that thing that happened is actually due to the vaccine or if it was due to something else. We also have the Vaccine Safety Data Link and the Post-Licensure Rapid Immunization Safety Monitoring. So this is 2 networks across the United States, and they're looking at all of these people that have received this vaccine. Scientists are using them to monitor how safe the vaccines are. And we also have the Clinical Immunization Safety Assessment Project, which is a collaboration between the CDC and different medical research centers, and they're looking to understand vaccine safety, identify prevention strategies for any kind of adverse event following immunization. Things like, we've noticed that people of a certain age group getting this vaccine will be fainting. What can we do about that? So now they recommend that in this certain age group, we sit people down and we lay them down because there's a high chance of fainting after a vaccine. So that's the type of thing that they're looking for. Vaccines are one of the greatest public health successes that we have seen. The bubbles on the left side are looking at the annual number of disease cases in the United States in the 1900s before the vaccines were introduced. The bubbles on the right look at the number of disease cases in 2010 after these vaccines have been introduced. So it is a reminder that, while the disease rates have decreased, they haven't disappeared entirely. There is only one vaccine. There's only one disease, smallpox, that was entirely eradicated by vaccination. We no longer give a smallpox vaccination because smallpox is not endemic in the world. It is not there. We do not see very many cases of diphtheria, but we do see some. We don't see many cases of pertussis. We do see some cases of tetanus and polio and measles. But the point of this graphic is to show you that vaccines work. The fewer number of people we have getting sick, the better. This slide talks about community immunity or herd immunity. If you look on the left-hand side of the top tile, we see all the purple. Nobody is immunized, and there are two people in red who aren't immunized. They are sick and they're contagious. So if no one is immunized, this contagious disease is going to spread throughout the population. We saw that with measles. We saw that with COVID. In the middle tile, we see that some people are immunized. These are the people in yellow. And so the contagious disease is still going to spread through some of the population, but the people in yellow are going to protect other people from getting this disease. The bottom tile is where most of the people are immunized, and the sick people are not spreading the disease at all to those few purple people who are still not immunized. And while these people might not be immunized by choice, they may also not be immunized because they can't be. Maybe they're allergic to something in the vaccine. Maybe they are pregnant and this vaccine hasn't been tested in pregnant people yet. Maybe they're young children and they haven't yet reached the age where they can receive the vaccine. So what community immunity does is it protects those people who aren't vaccinated from getting sick. So the more people we have vaccinated, the less the disease will spread, and the less chance we have also of having the disease mutate to become something that we're maybe not immunized against. All right, so now that we know how vaccines are created and how they're safe, let's look at some of the vaccines that are recommended by ACIP and the CDC for teens and preteens. This chart shows the global number of deaths in children less than 5 years of age. The colored parts of these bars on the top of the bars there are causes of death that were preventable by vaccines or partially preventable by vaccines. So the red, the green, and the orange lines are due to tetanus, to whooping cough, or to the measles. And the blue, purple, and indigo bars were due to things that could have been prevented by vaccines, things like encephalitis due to meningitis, or diarrheal disease that could have been prevented by a rotavirus vaccine, or acute respiratory infections that could have been prevented by the flu or pneumococcal vaccines. And so while the number of child deaths for which there are vaccines available declined from 5.5 million deaths to 1.8 million deaths in 2017, there are still a lot of children dying in the world from vaccine-preventable disease. In the United States, there are approximately 42,000 adults and 300 children who die each year from vaccine-preventable diseases. So a big question I get is why now? A lot of children went through the childhood vaccination schedule and they were all up to date and everything's great. And parents and teenagers are all asking, why do we still need to be given vaccines? Vaccines are a lifelong thing. You get different vaccines across the lifespan for different reasons, for different diseases that are more serious as your lifespan progresses. But at 11 to 12 years old, a preteen is going to be receiving vaccines that not only protect them from diseases and infections that make adolescents specifically sick, it also protects them from illnesses they are at a greater risk of contracting. And vaccines can extend the protection from the childhood vaccines that they already received. So the vaccines that are recommended for teens and preteens are vaccines against meningococcal disease, human papillomavirus or HPV, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, which is whooping cough, influenza, and COVID-19. And as we saw with VAERS and with our ongoing monitoring of vaccines, we saw that fainting after a vaccine is far more common in adolescents. So when they are given vaccines, teens and preteens are seated or lying down during vaccination and for 15 minutes afterwards, just to make sure that everything's okay. Meningococcal vaccine is preventing disease from the causative agent Neisseria meningitidis. Meningitis is spread through the exchange of saliva or respiratory and throat secretions. And the symptoms of meningitis include a sudden fever, a headache, a stiff neck, flu-like symptoms, nausea and vomiting, sensitivity to light, rash, especially on the legs, and confusion. Meningococcal disease moves very quickly and can be very fatal. Symptoms can progress to death in as few as 24 hours. 10 to 15% of individuals who contract meningitis will die from complications, and those that don't die, 11 to 19% will suffer permanent consequences, things like seizures, the loss of limbs, kidney damage, hearing loss, or skin scarring. According to the CDC, from 2016 to 2018, serotype B of meningitis caused more than 60% of all U.S. meningococcal disease cases in patients aged 16 to 23. And in 2019, 21.8% of 17-year-olds had received one or more doses of meningitis type B vaccine. 2 doses of the quadrivalent meningitis vaccine called MenACWY are recommended for all teenagers. It protects against types A, C, W, and Y, and teenagers should get 1 dose at 11 to 12 years of age and 1 dose at 16 years of age. 2 doses of meningococcal type B vaccine may also be recommended to protect against that particular type of meningitis, but do talk to your healthcare provider. Common side effects include redness and pain at the injection site and a mild fever. These typically resolve within 1 to 2 days. More serious side effects, which resolve 3 to 5 days, include ongoing pain and redness and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle and joint pain, fever or chills, nausea or diarrhea, and dizziness and fainting. But we do recognize that those things happen to teenagers, so when your teen gets the vaccine, they will likely be placed on a bed or in a chair to receive the vaccine in case they do faint. Human papillomavirus causes infections that can lead to cancer. Nearly 36,000 men and women are diagnosed with a cancer that had been caused by an HPV infection, and we see these cancers in the head, the neck, the mouth, the cervical region, the vagina and vulva, the penis, the anus, and we see genital warts as well. So HPV vaccination protects preteens before they are exposed to the cancer-causing agent. At age 11 to 12, preteens are recommended to get 2 doses of Gardasil 9. Gardasil 9 protects against cancers types 6, 11, 16, and 18, which are the 2 that cause cancer, as well as 31, 33, 45, 52, and 58. Doses should be given 6 months apart, so you'll get the first dose and then 6 months later get the second dose. However, if the series is started after the teen's 15th birthday, a third dose is recommended. So you'll get the first dose, the second dose will be at 2 months later, and then the third dose will be at 6 months later. So this is what ACIP saw as you age, it becomes less effective. So we really want to make sure that preteens are getting these vaccines when they should be getting them so that they can have the most effectiveness as possible. Side effect of the HPV vaccine includes redness and pain at the injection site, mild swelling at the injection site, fever, dizziness, fainting, nausea, headache, fatigue, and muscle or joint pain. Tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis are other diseases we would like to protect the teens against. All children in the United States are recommended to have already had several vaccinations against tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. So this one for your teen will be continuing that coverage and that protection. Tetanus and diphtheria are both caused by a toxin that is produced by a bacteria. In tetanus, we see jaw cramping, muscle spasms and stiffness, trouble swallowing, seizures, headaches, and fever, and it's spread by bacteria found in the soil or in dust or in manure. It gets into the body through breaks in the skin, and without the vaccine, 1 in 5 who get tetanus will die. So we do recommend if you've had a puncture wound, if you accidentally got cut by a rusty nail, that we update your tetanus vaccination to make sure that you are covered. Diphtheria is produced by a bacteria and it makes a coating in the throat, making it hard to breathe or swallow. You can see sore throat, you can see a mild fever and chills, but generally you see this white substance in the back of the throat. You can also spread diphtheria via coughing and sneezing, and in children less than 5, 1 in 5 with diphtheria will die. So we do want to make sure that not only are the children protected, but we're not spreading them amongst teenagers. Pertussis is from Bordetella pertussis bacteria. The symptoms include runny nose, mild cough, but these coughs are coughing fits and they last 10 weeks or longer. It's a very gasping cough. People can't catch their breath. You can even have apnea, which means you can't breathe. You might be turning blue. Pertussis is spread through coughing, sneezing, and breathing. It can be very deadly to babies and young children, and we have seen that pertussis is spread from grandparents who have waning protection from their vaccinations to their newborn grandbabies. So we do want to make sure not only are babies and teenagers and adults covered, but that maybe new grandparents get a booster of pertussis to make sure that their new infant grandchildren are kept safe. After having the DTaP vaccination throughout childhood, ACIP recommends that the Tdap vaccination to protect against tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis be given to preteens aged 11 to 12 years old, just to continue that protection that they had when they were children. Side effects of this vaccine are very often not seen at all. But if they are seen, it will be redness and swelling and pain at the injection site, perhaps a low-grade fever, maybe vomiting. More serious side effects can be seen in a high fever, seizures, and dizziness and fainting. But again, that is very much not the common occurrence. Finally, just a brief bit about influenza or the flu. Flu viruses are constantly changing, and we do recommend that people over the age of 6 months have a yearly vaccine to protect against the viruses that are most likely to cause the most illness. We have seen somewhere between 130 and over 1,200 children die from the flu each year, so we want to make sure that they're protected not only with a vaccine for themselves, but that those around them also get the vaccine to decrease the spread. Symptoms of the flu include fever or chills, a sore throat and cough, runny or stuffy nose, a headache, muscle and body aches, tiredness, vomiting, and diarrhea. And the way that the flu vaccine is created is that we look at the other hemisphere and what they saw in the previous flu season and make vaccines with the viruses that were predominant in that season within the vaccine so that we can hopefully prevent against the viruses that will be spreading. The CDC and ACIP does recommend that all individuals aged 6 months or older receive the vaccine for the flu. Anyone in that age group can get an injectable vaccine, but there are also nasal spray vaccines, which are available for people aged 2 years to 49 years. Side effects from the injectable vaccine include redness and swelling and pain at the injection site, headache, fever, nausea, and muscle aches. And side effects from the nasal spray include runny nose, wheezing, headache, vomiting, and muscle aches. Parents can find vaccines for their teens and preteens at their primary care provider or family doctor. You can also go to pharmacies around the state, including CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid. There are quite a few community health clinics that you can go to. Planned Parenthood also has vaccines for HPV, hepatitis A, and hepatitis B. If you'd like more information on anything you've heard about today, please visit the Immunization Coalition of Delaware's website at https://immunizedelaware.org. We have lots of resources for you, we have lots of information, and we really want to answer your questions. Thank you so much for listening.